Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good whatever time it is, wherever you are, whoever you are. Welcome once again to Full Fat Spoiler Chat, the show in which we folks at Nerd Caliber talk about a recent piece of nerdy entertainment and we look at it in depth. So we talk about things we like about it, things we don't like about it, things that worked or didn't. We talk about the themes, the messages, the important stuff behind the main story, which means that we have to, as it says all around me here, spoil it. What we're spoiling tonight is the recent Guillermo del Toro movie, a version of which is still in theaters, Nightmare Alley. I'm Rodney Brown. I'm the editor in chief of Nerd Caliber, a first person shooter on Facebook as a cosplay photographer, Burley underscore adopter on Twitter, a couple of other places. Joining me tonight is the man with the best vest. It's not made out of gorilla chest, as far as I know. Greg, if you'd
But you can
introduce
see
yourself.
it if you'd like.
You can.
Hi, everybody. Greg Snyder, aka Wonder Llama. You can find me at Wonder Llama Photography, Wonder Llama Cosplay. Although I frankly haven't kept that page up in ages, just all my personal stuff. You can also find us at Red Raven Studios, just outside of Boston, doing all sorts of fun, creative photo stuff. We've actually got next weekend, we're doing a fun homage to No Way Home. Unfortunately, a little after the movie peaked. We had originally scheduled it, but stupid blizzards kept getting in the way. And you live in New England, you're a pawn of the weather. But that's our studio. That's where we're at, Red Raven Studios in just south of Boston. Looking forward to talking about a fairly interesting, very different movie from what we usually talk about.
This is true in both cases. So, as we do when we start these things out, before we do starting these things out, we will do our first little promo here, which is we're trying to build our numbers on Twitch. If you have a Twitch account, we'd love you to go to that URL that's on your screen right there, twitch.tv/nerdcaliber, and maybe follow us and maybe comment and chat on there as opposed to Facebook Live or YouTube, the other places where we do this when we do it live. So, Nightmare Alley is a movie that hit the theaters December 17th, 2021, directed by and co-written by Guillermo del Toro. It's based on a 1946 novel by a William Lindsay Gresham that was immediately turned in 1947 into a noir movie starring Tyrone Power and a bunch of other people. This current version stars Bradley Cooper, Cate Blanchett, Rooney Mara, Willem Dafoe, Toni Collette, David Strathairn, like a literal
Ron
rogues get.
Perlman. Ron Perlman.
Ron Perlman, absolutely. Tim Blake Nelson, yeah, a rogues gallery of just absolutely amazing actors. The story follows a man named Stanton Carlyle, who, when the movie starts out, we see he's burning down a house which has a dead body in it. The exact nature of what any sort of relationship or why he's doing this is unknown. Dead body. And then he becomes a drifter, winds up getting a job at a carnival, working as a carny. Where he winds up befriending the local mentalist act and basically learns their skills and leaves the carnival with one of the carny act, the pretty young girl, to set himself up as essentially a psychic or mentalist in, of all places, beautiful Buffalo, New York. Now, this is set in 1939, so Buffalo was an absolute just hotbed of the industrial East. So there was a ton of money there. It's not quite what we think of Buffalo right now.
I mean, Buffalo is the other side of Niagara Falls. So it
Yes,
was that whole sort of that zone of honeymooning, going up there for all the clubs. It was not exactly the Catskills North, but not far removed from it in a sense.
right. it's also, again, because of Niagara, it was close to Canada, so you had, particularly at the, shortly after the end of Prohibition, you still had an awful lot of, let's say, entertainment
Cheap hooch.
connections, yeah, cross border. Um, and he winds up getting involved with a psychiatrist played by Kate Blanchett, and pulls a very involved con, essentially, using his sort of fake mentalist powers, um, on one of the wealthiest men in Buffalo, and you know the outcome and circumstances of how that plays out is basically the last third, the last act of the movie. Um,
Did we make our standard we're spoiling the hell out of this disclaimer?
we did, but there's never a wrong time to let people know that this is the full fat spoiler chat. Harry Brady, welcome to the chat there over on the YouTube.
Hey, Harry.
Again, Harry, we're spoiling the hell out of Nightmare Alley if you haven't seen it, and you don't want it to be spoiled. And if you are at all interested in seeing it, you do not want it to be spoiled. Trust me. But we're going to spoil it. So there's that. There's that warning. There's your warning, Harry. All right, so that's basically the gist of it. The reason I said, in case anybody really wants to go see it, is it's still running in theaters now, in a version that started in mid-January, where they re-released it in theaters entirely in black and white. So if you want to really noir out, you can go watch this whole thing in black and white.
I did not know that.
The problem is the cinematography is just so, I'm kind of jumping the gun here, just so unbelievably gorgeous that it would almost be a shame.
Yep.
But so since I just sort of jumped the gun, Greg, let's start.
Great way to spoil the cinematography.
Yeah, I ruined it for you, didn't I? What, aside from the cinematography, did you like about it? What worked for you? What did they shoot for and really nail in your mind?
What did I like about it? I thought the story was interesting. It was a lot of that sort of very vintage noir aspect of who's conning who. You never quite know who's being honest and who's grifting. But in reality, everybody's grifting everybody all the time, unfortunately, except for Rooney Mara's character, Molly, who gets caught in the middle. She's an honest grifter. She only grifts marks at the carny.
Yes.
Which I always love that kind of thing. Usually films like this, it's either everybody is equally terrible and they're all grifting each other, they have an angle, or it becomes obvious who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, and it's very, pardon the phrase here, but black and white. It really never is. And even the moments of sincerity, you don't know whether it's genuine sincerity or really convincing grifter sincerity. I thought the story was good. The acting was fantastic all around. I kept seeing someone other than Bradley Cooper playing Stanton for some reason. I thought he was very good, but I feel like I don't know who I would pull out of a hat for a name, but I feel like I could see a couple of other people doing a better job with that role.
Yeah.
Kate Blanchett is the embodiment of that Joan Crawford, vintage Golden Age Hollywood femme fatale. She nailed the look, nailed the posing, nailed the way she smokes, the way she drinks a whiskey, the way she talks to people. She's been one of my favorite actresses forever, and this really is just another great opportunity for her. Everybody else is great as well. Willem Dafoe is that interesting combination of affable and terrifying that he does really well. Toni Collette, I love her. She's great in her offstage role. I didn't think the couple of scenes where she's on stage, she's basically she's the mentalist, and they're doing the old put your name and a loved one that you've lost in an envelope, and then they kind of tease out the facts, cold read type stuff. You expect a little more big drama out of somebody who's on stage performing to the Rubes in the in the Midwest where the first act takes place, and she was a little flat in there. But other than that, she was terrific. Um, One of the things I liked, but this is very much a your mileage may vary. The pace never changed. It was languid. Well, maybe not never, but it was a very slow burn
Yes.
for most of it.
Yep.
Things accelerated a little towards the end as all of the, all the pieces came together as one would expect. But there was, it's a Guillermo del Toro movie. So I kept thinking it was going to be sort of not because he made 10 Cloverfield Lane, but I was expecting it to have a similar, if you've seen 10 Cloverfield Lane, the entire thing is basically a bottle episode. It's a psychotic, it's a psychological who's right, who's real, who's fake, who's lying, who's telling the truth, psychological drama that ends with monsters for some reason that we don't know. That's probably movie behind the scenes stuff.
Because J.J. Abrams bought a movie that was already in development and decided to make it a Cloverfield movie.
Because inside baseball.
Exactly.
Because Guillermo del Toro is very visibly attached to this movie, my expectation kept being that Doug Jones in some outrageous attire, some costume was going to pop out of the woodwork or, slowly get introduced. It never happened. Yeah. That's the big spoiler right there, as much as anything. If you're going in thinking, hey, Guillermo del Toro, there's going to be the creature from the Black Lagoon is going to wind up sleeping with the pretty girl. Nope, doesn't happen.
Or fairies are going to come flying. So there's a scene where, shortly after Carlisle or Stanton winds up working for the carnival, the carnival geek gets loose, and everybody has to try to find him. And he's walking into the fun house, the big mouth of very 1930s Max Fleischer looking, fun house mouth, and I'm going to say, yep, this is it. This is where it's gonna. Nope. I mean, it's creepy as heck, but this is a psychological thriller. It is not a supernatural thriller, despite, because probably Del Toro's, track record, so many times you're going, here it is. Here's where the thing is gonna come out and do the thing.
So I know we tend to talk about themes afterwards or later in the bit, but one of the big kind of takeaways I had was the supernatural, the horror, the monster stuff aside, one of the things Del Toro does really well is subtext.
Yep.
And the subtext of so many of his movies is the monsters aren't monsters. They're just different. The people are the monsters. The normal looking guys in the 3-piece suit with the fedora or the pleasant looking housewife in the dress. There's no subtext. You know who the monsters are. The people are the monsters. And even the affable looking ones. I mean, great point. Willem Dafoe seems very, very pleasant. He's a nice guy to talk to. He's happy to have a drink with you. But the scene where he's talking about how to basically Shanghai someone coming out of World War I who's got, let's call it shell shock, was what they called it back in the day, in just bamboozling them into being the geek, being the freak show against their will, is terrifying. It's so terrifying.
Yep.
Because there's very much that element of, well, man, I've never been in a world war, but I've been super down on my luck at 1 or 2 points in my life, and low ebbs where I could clearly see getting taken in by a very smooth talking, guy that runs a carny, and well, crap, that could have been me in that cage.
Biting heads off chickens.
So again, just to wrap up what I was saying a minute ago, the pace is very slow. And I don't say that as a criticism. I liked it. So many movies. I mean, if you're used to a lot of the stuff we tend to review on Full Fat Spoiler Chat, Marvel movies, Spider-Man movies, things like that, they're whiz-bang action scene every 3 minutes. The dialogue goes a mile a minute. This is the opposite of that. This is a slow burn. It picks up intensity without really changing the pace of the movie all that much. Obviously, somewhat towards the end, as all of the different things kind of uh, collapse into each other. Um, it's such a rare thing these days to find a big budget movie with major Hollywood A-list actors, a Hollywood A-list director. Um, I loved it. I loved the fact that it just it's not exactly white knuckle gripping the edge of your chair sort of stuff. Um, no jump scares or anything like that, but it's still because that the old expression, how do you boil a frog? You put him in cold water and you turn the heat up gradually so he doesn't know he's boiling. Um, that's the way this kind of plays out. It starts off so slow that you almost don't realize that you're the frog in the pan until the water is boiling and it's too late.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah. So I agree. Oh, by the way, this is a complete aside, but it just occurred to me. I completely forgot this thing even existed. In the early 1970s, DC Comics had a comic book called The Geek. And it was literally about a circus geek who actually had powers where he couldn't be hurt. I mean, you could break a limb and it would just come right back. But he was, a feral creature. And there were young kids who sort of guided him to, they would use him to do good things. I completely forgot that existed, but it was really surprisingly dark for like 1970s DC Comics. If anybody's a comic fan, go look into that.
That wasn't really their jam back in the 70s. Everything was still pow, socko, blam.
They did, I mean, you did start to have Swamp Thing. So they were starting to move a little bit in that direction, but yeah. Anyway, a completely off topic. So I agree. I think the story is really, so the plot is intricate. The story about how they get that to that plot, and really the plot doesn't start until the second act. So the story of how they get to that plot is actually still it's a good story. Helped along by these absolutely amazing performances. I agree. So I don't know if I want to say that I could see somebody better than Bradley Cooper in it, because you got to remember he has to also then be this mentalist fake psychic who literally charms the hell out of the richest people in upstate New York.
Yep.
But yeah, there probably are a lot of other people who, if they did it, they would add even more menace.
Yeah.
Even
he
more
plays it. I was gonna say he plays it kind of soft for most of it. He doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
There's only really one or two bits where the darkness comes out, and even when it does, it's cold. It's not explosive.
Yes. But I think that's a decision between him and Del Toro. I read a little bit of stuff about this, and apparently, Leonardo DiCaprio was originally cast for it, and then he had a scheduling conflict, and Cooper came in, and that would be a completely different performance. But apparently he and Del Toro just like bonded like brothers over just discussing the nature of Stanton's character before he nailed the contract. So clearly Del Toro and Cooper wanted that just absolute cold, completely amoral menace when it does come out.
So the one, I can't think of his name. It's not worth trying to look up at the moment, but I just watched The Artist for the first time recently, the black and white silent movie, sort of the homage to vintage Hollywood. And the male lead in that is incredible. I mean, it's a similar story arc. He goes from the top of the world, top of his game, to that far away from successfully killing himself. He's got a similar look, that kind of vintage, the hair slicked back, the little thin pencil mustache, the Errol Flynn. I could see him doing that. He does more with zero dialogue than a lot of actors do with, Amy Palladino dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Jean Dujardin
Thank you.
It's a French movie, so I'm not sure how well that would translate. But yeah, there are other actors who could certainly
Sure.
have pulled this off.
Just an observation. It wasn't a knock on Cooper because I think he did an excellent job.
Yeah.
It just there was a few times where I'm like, I feel like there's another guy who would have been just that little bit creepier in here.
Yeah. And I think so. Having it Cooper, the ridiculously handsome Bradley Cooper, who is portraying it really close to the chest and only revealing a very cold, basically sociopath at times, I think works to make his ultimate fall, like ultimate fall at the very end, that much more dramatic. Knowing that somebody who looks like Bradley Cooper is going to become what he's going to become is, it's like, whoa, okay. And that might not work for somebody who, like, say, Michael Shannon, who would certainly bring a ton of menace. I mean, like, come on, he's Zod. It might, and he certainly can play charming as well. And even I can't remember the name of the movie, but he can play a absolutely, devoted and a torn apart father. His son was his kid had special powers.
Yeah, are you thinking? Oh shoot, I reviewed that for the site years ago when it was in the theaters. Something Country.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it, but
I can't think of it. But I know what you mean. But even in that, he's a little scary.
It's because he's Michael Shannon.
Because he's Michael Shannon, and that it's funny when I was talking about the idea of subtext versus just text about whether the monster is the monster or a person. His character in Shape of Water, Michael Shannon's character,
right?
Because he's a G-man, he's clean cut, it's that kind of role that Michael Shannon just lives in, where he's so devoted to whatever the thing is. In this case, the Red Menace and or Fish Boy, that he keeps the pot really tight on that boiling water, or the lid rather on the boiling pot. Sorry.
Yeah.
And then when the lid comes off, holy crap.
So I'm glad I completely forgot about this too, which is weird because I just read it a couple hours ago. But apparently Shannon was supposed to be Pete, Madame Zena's husband, the mentalist, that was played by David Strathairn. I think Strathairn's performance brought way more pathos and sadness to a character that I'm not sure Shannon's performance would have pulled off.
I agree. It's a relatively small role screen time wise, but it's a huge inflection point kind of role for everybody else in the movie.
Yep. And again, it's a spoiler chat. Pete is the Madame Zena, who is the stage presence, is Madame Zena's husband, and also the one who has all of the skills for, code reading, the mentalist tricks, essentially. All of the things that allow somebody on a stage to figure out what's in an envelope, just by holding it up to their head, when in fact there's somebody feeding them information through codes.
Did you just do a Karnak the Magnificent?
I did do a Karnak the Magnificent. Yes, I did.
God, we're both old. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's kind of the John Edwards, but way more pathos and way more interesting. Yeah, I agree. Michael Shannon would have brought, I mean, he's way more noticeable.
Yep.
As David Strathairn disappears into a role, whereas I feel like.
Hello. I feel like you just froze up, because either that or you're taking a really long time to think of that thought. So let's hope Greg comes back without having to reboot his system.
Sorry, am I back?
Your voice is back.
My voice is back. Apologies. We had a momentary loss of power here.
Oh, bummer.
There we go. Yeah, just
it's like 50 degrees and I mean, it's breezy, but anyway.
Anyway. yeah, I think let me turn my side light on so I'm a little less dark here. Um, yeah, I think Shannon would have been too much of a presence. He would have been he wouldn't have disappeared into the role the same sort of way.
Yeah.
And the basically just before Pete dies, his stark warning to Stanton, don't fuck with this stuff. This is, I know you think it's all parlor tricks, but this will get people hurt. This will get people killed. This will, ruin relationships and families and people. Um, he, he sells it.
Yeah.
He sells it in a big way without feeling like he's overselling something.
Yeah. So one of the other things I want to talk about that I really love, and God, it's so freaking beautiful, is the production design and the cinematography. Both of those are up for Academy Awards, as is Best Costume. And let's just go like that. I mean, come on. All of that. Production design, look at that lighting. Look at that lighting. Costumes, and then the cinematography. It's just an absolute treat to look at.
Yep.
Almost every moment on screen, where's the one where he's on stage doing his mentalist act? Just look at that. So there was a movie that came out or hit streaming, a Hugh Jackman movie called Reminiscence, which was supposed to be like a science fiction noir set relatively near future, where an awful lot of like Miami and other places are flooded because of climate change. And it's a noir type story, but it's not. It doesn't look noir. And you can tell they're trying at times, and they're just not succeeding. Every second of this movie is just drenched in noir aesthetic. I would kill over and over again to get Kate Blanchett's office. That,
Oh yeah.
that art, the height of Art Deco in her building, and then her office. Oh, God.
Yeah. It's funny. We, not to sidetrack here, but as I mentioned, we have a see if I can speak here tonight. We have a small photo studio near Boston, and we're always on the lookout for interesting furniture to add. We've got sets that we do, and we'll buy something, we'll use it for 6 months, we'll sell it. That couch, that U-shaped padded couch.
Yep.
I mean, if they either commission somebody, a master furniture maker, to build that, or they spent a lot of money buying it from some vintage store somewhere. It was absolutely gorgeous, and I would, much like you said, I would kill to have half the furniture. Just thinking of the photo shoots that I could do in a set that resembled that office room.
So good.
Yeah. Lighting is magnificent. I think they must have, whoever did Kate Blanchett's lighting was undoubtedly the same person who did Angelica Houston in The Addams Family, because it was that classic,
yep,
relatively dark with just a strip of, I mean, it's old Hollywood stuff too. I mean, Joan Crawford, Betty Davis, Marlene Dietrich, you see that all the time, but that beautiful strip of golden light across the small portion of the face that just says, look here, don't look at any of the rest of the mystery.
Yes.
It's not overused, which is it's easy to do. It's easy to lean on that too heavily, but I thought that it was deployed smartly.
Yeah. It's drenched in all of this look, but yeah, they don't overdo it. And I think that's a testament to the cinematographer, is that they know exactly, where to draw the line and let some scenes, like, the scenes in the carnival, when they're inside a tent or something, when you're dealing with incandescent light and so on, it's very noir. But when they're outside, not so much, except some of the scenes at night. It's really amazing.
And typical for a Del Toro movie, that he's got a big hand in the lighting, the cinematography, the production design is kind of the fifth Beatle, if you will, that sets the mood, that conveys a sense of hope or a sense of dread
Yeah,
or a sense of what's about to happen. Um, on a similar note, I appreciated how restrained the score was.
I was just going to get to that, but since you did, go
Sorry.
right ahead.
Okay. Um, Similar to what I was saying about frenetic action in so many modern movies, we've gotten, I won't say accustomed, but it's very common for scores to be very strident, to be very, here's what's about to happen. Major key uplift. Okay, something nice is happening. Minor key down. Oh no, something bad's happening.
Hans
Not
Zimmer
to
boom.
mention the Hans Zimmer boom. Um, the volume was subtle. It was borderline background. You were
Yeah.
aware that there was music, but it didn't play a major part. um
I mean,
I
aside
appreciated that.
from the fact that it was period accurate,
Yep.
that it was very, Tin Pan Alley or jazzy or or what have you. Um, but yeah, but not at all in your face.
Yep. Yeah, and like especially the non-diegetic stuff, which can be so insistent and so loud and so overdone, um that it was almost like that sense of, what's the analogy, like when you get a tooth pulled and you kind of spend a couple days trying to figure out where that
Right.
tooth went.
Ghost
I
tooth.
remember thinking like the first half of the movie, like it feels like this is less than a lot of, oh, that's why. It's not, the soundtrack isn't louder than the dialogue.
Yes. Which, when you've got actors like this, you really don't want that to be the case.
Yep.
That would be just such a waste. All right, we've gone on for quite a while on what we liked, and we could probably keep going on because it's just a beautiful and very interesting movie. But Greg, what didn't you like? What didn't work for you? What do you think they shot for and just missed?
I don't know that I could really pin anything down. I could nitpick a few things here and there, a few creative decisions, but there wasn't much big picture wise that I didn't think worked. It was even. There were no plot holes. Um, what wasn't explicitly spelled out was implicit enough that you could fill in for yourself.
Yep.
Like, what the corpse was at the beginning of the movie. They just drop breadcrumbs throughout the whole thing, and then when they actually do the flashback to, here we go, big spoiler here. He basically, Stan had an awful relationship with his dad, and he opened all the windows in the dead of winter somewhere in the Midwest and let him freeze to death, and then wrapped him in a sheet, lit him on fire, and walked away. Um, you kind of get a feeling of that coming on, but you don't, it's not until the very end that comes out. There was no plot hole aspect of that. You didn't go, oh wait, they said this, and it didn't quite happen that way. Um, I think I was not even so much the expecting a Del Toro monster to come out somewhere. Once it was clear that this was just a Hollywood homage to noir,
Yep.
or an homage to Hollywood noir movies, you better said. Um, I stopped thinking that was going to happen. I did think there was going to be bigger twists at some point, that there would be more of a knife in the back reveal that you didn't see coming.
Right.
Dare I say, a bit of an M. Night Shyamalan something or other at the end. Um,
Now I do have to say
one,
that was my headline for my review. What if Guillermo del Toro made a Shyamalan movie? So
what was I going to say? The the what comes around goes around aspect of the very last scene where he comes back and he's trying to find work as a mentalist at a carnival. Um, I I think would have been more powerful if they had just cut to what would effectively be Stan's first person view of the guy who runs the carnival, talking about a job that he has and pouring him a whiskey and ending with the line, but it's just a temporary thing, because that was such a full circle to the beginning of the movie,
Yeah.
and like the upward arc, and the cutaway to Bradley Cooper doing his every emotion on his face went on a little long. It felt a little like, okay, yeah, I get it. This is awful. He's accepting his fate. He knows he overplayed his hand, and now he's dealing with the consequences.
Yeah.
I think it would have been just that much more powerful if that one line that was so so clearly part of what Willem Dafoe was saying. You get him in with it's just a temporary thing, and how devious that is. If they just ended with that and then done like a slow pan out or just a slow fade to black from there, I think it would have been even more impactful.
Yeah.
But beyond that, not much.
So I haven't read the novel, but I read the synopsis of it, and that is the last line of the novel. It ends with, but it's just a temporary job until we can find a real geek.
Interesting.
And so I guess I agree with you. I think it would have been more impactful. I think I understand why they did it, though, because if you left it on that line, there's still the possibility that Stan might not fall that far. He might turn it down. And this made it absolutely clear that, nope, he is willing to do literally whatever it takes to get that next drink, basically.
Yep.
So the only... oh, go ahead.
I was just sorry to interrupt you. I feel like they could have ended with that line, and instead of that was like a good 45, 50 plus seconds of him laughing, crying, laughing, despair,
right?
Black humor at his own hubris. I think they could have, if they'd framed the shot with, the actor saying it's only temporary, and done, perpendicular to the scene, and then just slowly panned up and out as Cooper just puts his head in the noose of his own making,
right,
would have been just as effective. Because at some point, like, it wasn't uncomfortable to watch him go through this whole crying, laughing at his own hubris. It wasn't uncomfortable the way sometimes real emotional stuff can seem. It felt like it went on way too long.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah. No, I get that. I didn't feel quite that way, and in fact, my problem with pacing, and I do have one problem with pacing. I agree with you that I love the slow burn. I love the fact that, first, second, and almost all of the third act, in fact, realistically, the third act, are all roughly at the same pace with a little bit of action acceleration near the end. And the denouement, the real end, just rushed for me. I don't know that I wanted the movie to go any longer, because it's a pretty long movie. But his fall into homelessness and alcoholism is a couple of minutes in the movie.
Yeah.
And again, I just did this a couple hours ago. It's not like I knew this before going in, but in the book, Grindel lives and sends people after him, and his descent is a series of narrow escapes from the people trying to catch him. So he has to go to a smaller and sketchier and scummier and ultimately just the worst rotten carnival he can get to, and then finally nothing, and he winds up homeless on a train and an alcoholic. And I don't know that I wanted to see all that, or they could have done it as a montage now that I know that it existed in the book. But it just, I remember going, oh, wow. All right, so we know part of the problem is his dad was an alcoholic. So, whether you believe there's a gene there or whether it's behavior or whatever, he is, as children of alcoholics are, more prone to having that condition. So, okay, I get it. Yes, it's pretty easy for him to fall down the alcoholism train. And yes, Kate Blanchett's doctor pushed him down those stairs.
Yep.
So, but it still just seemed really kind of rushed for me. I love the payoff, that last bit
Yeah.
about him getting the last job he could possibly get. Um, but going from literally just about to, well, actually ripping off one of the richest people in the Northeast, to a hobo on a train and an alcoholic in 2 or 3 minutes of screen time was just like,
Yep.
okay.
Two, three, four fairly short scenes all tied together.
Yep.
Yeah, I that didn't exactly stick with me as such, but as you're saying, I'm like, yeah, I remember thinking somewhat along the same lines that it was, the slope up was very, very gradual. And then it just was literally like a 90-degree turn straight down as opposed to a little more played out.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that would have, I mean, the whole thing where he gets shot, he manages to stumble away, hides on the train. That whole thing was, as close to like a big action sequence as we're going to get. And then to go from there to it was like a flash forward. He wakes up with a scruffy beard and he's at a hobo camp passing around a bottle. And then next thing you know, he's at this derelict carnival looking to be the new geek.
Well, to
Yeah,
be clear, he's looking for any work. He's looking for mentalist work.
yeah, he winds up being the new geek.
Yeah.
The I think, and this is not really a spoiler because it's not ultra germane to the plot per se, but the closest thing to a jump scare in the whole movie and a real like harbinger of the fact that the wheel had just turned was the scene with Mary Steenburgen, the judge's wife, who's it's a bit of a side thing. He does a mentalist act. Their son died in World War One. She's been bereft. Their marriage has fallen apart. They've been, strangers in the same house. Stan cons them and does a whole, yeah, your son is here. He's reaching out. He wants you to be happy. He wants you to,
And
to live your life.
I want to so it's not a complete side. This is the method he uses because these people are connected to Grindel to get a connection to Grindel, understanding that he might actually be able to do what Grindel wants, which is see his dead girlfriend.
Yep. Anyway, that was such a brilliant. I liken that to the what do you call it? Why am I blanking on the name of the Silence of the Lambs switcheroo when the FBI is coming to the house and Clarice is going to the other house, and it's Stan is like trying to convince himself and his girlfriend, I'm not conning people with this stuff. I'm helping them. Like the judge and his wife are going to reconcile, and the rich guy's getting rid of all this guilt. I'm the good guy here. We know that's a load of BS. The scene where it's looking like the judge and his wife are going to reconcile, they're going to come back together and fix their wife, and she pulls out a gun and shoots him in the face, and then in a delirium of madness literally puts the barrel of a gun in her eye socket, and thankfully they pull away and do the sort of cut to another scene with a gunshot and the thud, because no one really wants to see what happens when you put a large caliber revolver through your head. That was such a shock. I felt like I could predict a lot of the next what was happening.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of that twistiness. That one completely caught me off guard. That was a complete woo!
Yeah. And I have to say, so I guess I do have one other. It's not really it didn't work for me, but I knew where he was going to end up by the middle of the second act. Again, I'd never seen the Tyrone Power movie. I hadn't read the book, but just the way they had set up, and then the importance of the storyline of the geek in the first act. And then once it was very clear by the middle of the second act that he was a really bad person, then it was like, okay, I can see where this is going. And that was no surprise to me whatsoever. I still loved it.
Yep.
But it was one of those, yep, I knew that was going to happen.
Yep, for sure. I thought much the same. It was, I mean, it's hard to not telegraph some things like that from time to time.
Right.
And there wasn't really an attempt to make it a, what do you call it? To make it a super twisty, no, he was really the good guy all along, or it was a dream. There's no, conceit at the end. There's no rug pulling at the end. So it wasn't a surprise in any way. I don't think I quite geeked onto the, pun intended, onto the aspect that the wheel was literally going to turn to that same point. But most of the rest of it, I mean, you knew anybody with that much hubris is going to fall.
Yeah.
And when Toni Collette does the tarot reading, it's a little on the nose, to be sure. It's definitely foreshadowing or five shadowing or six shadowing in this case. But it's still, just because the train is going a certain direction, it's still fascinating to take the journey.
Absolutely. And again, with the story and these actors, I love the trip. All right. Theme, tone, we already talked about tone, message, and so on. What did you take from this, and what do you think Del Toro wanted you to take from this?
Don't fuck with the likes of Chris Angel, because one of you is going to lose. It's probably going to be you. Yeah, I just, like I said, the subtext as text about the seemingly most pleasant, affable, even banal people can be the most dangerous. And that's who you really got to watch out for. I think it was all about hubris as much as anything.
Yeah.
He, literally until that final scene, you could, I mean, to your point earlier, and it was very well taken. Stan does have that. Maybe this carnival will let me do my mentalist act again, and I can climb back up from the shithole I've dug for myself.
Yeah.
Even though we as the viewers know that's not going to happen. Those were kind of the big, the big messages, if you will, the subtext. The tone managed to be bleak without being bleak. It was, that bad things are happening to the bulk of the people here, but it wasn't just relentlessly crushing you, the viewer, with, just awful imagery or horrible so-and-so getting murdered violently.
Yeah.
So I think it was very successful in that. Obviously the cinematography was great. The production design was a big, all three of those, the sound design, lighting and cinematography design, and production design were kind of the unsung heroes that powered this from being what could have been a fairly trite film noir into something a little elevated, or a lot elevated. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see them win some awards. I don't think anybody's up for an acting or for any of the the big ones, but for some of the technical stuff, it seems like it's pretty well earned.
Yep. So I agree. I think tonally, this is really surprising in that it is a pretty bleak overall story, which is generally not what you see from Del Toro. They can be very dark, but they're rarely bleak. And this is one of the few movies that I can actually say where I like very, very few of the people, at least the primary leads in it, and I still like the movie. And that's a credit again to the actors and to Del Toro, making me want to continue this ride, even though they're awful people. Um, and I think that one of the other messages you were talking about, moral complexity. I think he does a really good job of saying that even people who do things that are technically morally wrong, like the carnies and their grift in the carnival. You know, if you're on stage and you're taking a couple of bucks from somebody for doing a mentalist act or an electrician, the electric girl act, or whatever it is that they're doing, I mean, technically, yes, that's wrong, but the level of wrong is completely different than when you're, with some of the richest people in the world, or at least in, that part of the country, and are trying to take their money, which, and this is a very strong implication, Grindle is not a good guy. Um, he is, he's an auto parts boss, but he is like one step below or above a criminal underworld boss.
With a shaved head and a white suit, he could be Kingpin.
Literally. And so I think one of those messages, one of that bits of subtext is that, even when it comes to things that are morally questionable, power and wealth make them that much more horrible. Power and wealth will corrupt anything, including those things that are already on the edge of acceptability. Yep. I just look at Vince McMahon in wrestling.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. I mean I think the whole sort of carnival act genre of movies is not very common these days, but there is the kind of the notion of like the honest carny, and Xena and Pete kind of fall into that. They're gulling people. They're not using cold reads to what is in effect deep psychoanalysis, and then using the threads you pull out of somebody's darkest, pushed down farthest, part of their psyche to con them out of a shitload of money.
Right.
Which is what Cate Blanchett winds up doing, which is what Stanton winds up doing. Although she gets the money and he doesn't. Point well taken. If you go to a carnival and somebody, reads your fortune, cool. It's $2, whatever, 2 bits.
Right.
The tone, it's funny, the tone that I kind of got mostly from that first act was very, very reminiscent of Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Yes.
It reminded me a lot of the book, a lot of one of the earlier movie adaptations, same sort of setting. Little less of that sort of loss of childhood innocence element to it, but interestingly, the second half was very Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
Not the brutal cannibalism part, but Cate Blanchett, her character was very reminiscent of Lecter.
Yes.
In her very cold, slow, languid way of drawing things out of people. And that very kind of sotto voce way of getting into people's heads reminded me a lot of Lecter.
Now, before we wrap it up, is there any doubt in your mind well, you made this clear. I think I'd read somebody who said that they didn't think that the body in the fire at the beginning was his father, even though it's spelled out abundantly clear at the end. But also, did he kill Pete? Did he deliberately swap the wood alcohol with the grain alcohol? I think he did. I think it's pretty clear that there's an awful lot of guilt that he brings to the beginning of his relationship with Cate Blanchett that is not just about his father.
Yep. I remember. My wife watched the movie with me as well. I as soon as there's the red crate is wood alcohol, you drink it, you die. The blue crate is sugarcane alcohol, that'll get you drunk. That's okay. That was literal. I mean, talk about five shadowing. That
Right.
was, you knew that was going to play into it somehow. They didn't try to disguise it with like, it's dark and he can't see which color it is. He walks in, it's not clear which bottle he grabs per se. It wasn't like, it's the blue one. Oh, you grabbed the
Right.
red one. It's not spelled out explicitly, but as soon as he went in for that, I said to my wife, guaranteed dude's going to die from wood alcohol poisoning within the next two scenes.
Yeah.
Um, and what do you call it? I think that's made a little bit more clear with Kate Blanchett's observation. You've got a real problem with older men in your life, don't you? And
Yeah.
Pete was he was a nice guy, not an a-hole the way his dad was, but he's somewhat of an authority figure. He's a drunk. He's an older guy who knows better than everybody else. Yeah, he killed him.
Yeah. Yeah. That's subtitle: Nightmare Alley, the drunk killer. All right. Wrapping it up. Would you recommend this to people? And scale of 1 to 10, where do you put it?
I would absolutely recommend it to people. As we always say, your mileage may vary. If you are a fan of the noir genre, it ticks all those boxes. If you like a movie that takes its time, that isn't a mile a minute, you'll love it. If you like really, really good lighting, cinematography, etc., you'll love it. If none of those things appeal to you, it's not the movie for you. On a scale of 1 to 10, I would give it an 8.
Yeah. I agree in everything about that, with the one caveat for those people who are Del Toro fans, and we said this at the beginning, this is a psychological thriller. There is nothing supernatural about it whatsoever, aside from people pretending. And credit to Del Toro and the writers in every instance where you thought he might be moving down that supernatural path, they explain the grift like in detail. So yeah, I would say I would recommend it strongly for all the reasons that you said, in particular those performances too.
Absolutely.
And I think I did in my review land exactly the same spot, an 8 out of 10. It is a absolutely fantastic movie. I'm kind of ticked off that nobody got nominated for performances, and that Del Toro didn't get nominated for director in the Academy Awards, but it's the Academy Awards.
And it doubly interesting because he was nominated and won for Shape of Water, which also won Best Picture.
Right.
That was really one of the first times a quote unquote genre movie that had a supernatural element, a monster element, did that well. I mean, Pan's Labyrinth might have been nominated for sound design or something, I don't know, but not any of the big three or four.
Return of the King got Jackson his director's Oscar, and it was Best Picture that year. So
true. Good point. This is the kind of movie that the Academy Committee tends to gobble up. It's A-list actors, it's brilliant performances, it's an homage to vintage, Joan Crawford era Hollywood, in every aspect, except for there's no, big song and dance Busby Berkeley numbers.
Yeah.
This should be catnip.
Right. And it's not like there are some strong contenders. Power of the Dog is amazing, but there's not a lot others that are on the Best Picture list right now that clearly were better than this. Anyway. All right,
yeah,
folks.
But this year is the inception of the Twitter voting for their favorite movie award.
Which means nothing except for the fact that they read it out. Yep. All right, folks, we're wrapping it up. If you have a Patreon account and you would like to visit our website, patreon.com/nerdcaliber, we'd love to have you check us out. Maybe become a patron if you would like to. We have just 3 tiers, $2 for the lowest tier. Helps us get more content on the site, on YouTube and places like that. Coming up on Monday, it's Anime Octane, and right now we are going to be either talking in depth about the anime My Dress Up Darling, which is, so perfect for our cosplay focused mission here at Nerd Caliber, or we're going to spend 30 plus minutes just simping over Marin, the female lead, because she deserves it. And then Nerd Week Live, of course, next Thursday, Peacemaker. Just wrapped up today. So hold your guns until next Thursday, folks. All right, Greg, give us a goodbye.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I hope if you were on the stream tonight, you enjoyed it. If you're watching it somewhere down the road, I hope you liked it. Take a chance on a movie that's going to be a little different from the popcorn fare we're used to seeing. Stick it out. It's worth it. Although perhaps at this point we've kind of given you the plot and the spoilers, so you may not feel the need.
Well, still go watch it for the performances.
But still go watch it for the performances. You can catch me online, Wonder Llama. Chances are good you're going to find me through that somewhere. And if you're interested in fun, creative, wacky photography stuff outside of Boston, give us a shout. Red Raven Studios.
Awesome. So we'll see you at an upcoming show, folks. Please stay safe. All of our friends who are at Katsucon who decided to make that trip, please be safe. And so that we can see you at an upcoming con.